OT Life Hacker here with you, and it's always such a pleasure to see you guys. Hello! If you're new to my channel, welcome. I am OT Life Hacker. Please like and subscribe if you're interested to know more about the OT life hacks to help improve your quality of life and to know about the occupational therapy journey for those of you interested. I also have stuff on that, so this will be a good place, good resource for you. But above all, making sure that we are all well cared for and have that quality of life for ourselves is very important to me and to this channel. So today's video is going to be about the importance of making sure that your patients, whoever you're caring for, or if you are the patient, that you are being cared for in the best ways, the most safe ways, and advocating for yourself. Advocating meaning that you're speaking up if you feel something's not right. Speak up, because I'm about to share with you guys some horror stories from yesterday. So for those of you who have seen my Instagram, you saw the picture that I put up of me in my the gown, the hospital gown, and that was just moments before they took me to the room to do the procedure. And thank you guys so much to those of you, to the many of you who had reached out to me and checked up to make sure everything okay, what's going on, are you good? And I was like, oh, so sweet, thank you guys. Yes, I am good. I am looking the same, right? Sparkly, happy as always. Yes, nothing can kill this spark and spunk. So, alright, let's start off with the horror story from yesterday. So, I may look like I'm smiling in that picture, but I think that was after all the chaos, after part of the chaos. So what happened yesterday is that for the procedure, they have to do the IV, right? And so the first thing was that the IV, they were, I mean, you hear this many times where they're poking around trying to find the right place. And so they poked into my hand first, and I am pretty good with tolerating pain, given I have chronic problems too, chronic pain stuff. I'm pretty good with handling pain, I feel. But this one was a doozy. This one was pretty bad. They were poking around, and I mean, one thing is I need to gain some weight because I am pretty much all bone, sadly. And they're poking around trying to find the vein, and you can see it here. Can you see it? So they're poking around here, and I was like, oh, and the nurse who was taking the information down was watching my face, and the other nurse who was poking around, then they both saw my face, and I was cringing. I was like, oh, this is really painful. And at one point I finally said, oh, this hurts. This hurts a lot. And okay, maybe I sugarcoated it. I did say this kind of hurts, so, you know. But in my head I was saying this hurts a lot. So guys, make sure you speak up. Don't be like me and be like, oh, I can handle the pain. Sometimes it's not meant to be, because what happened was he was poking around, and then I had to tell him this kind of hurts. And then so he's like, oh, I'm sorry. So he decided, okay, you know, this isn't working. Then it was at least like 2 minutes of him poking around, and the needle was going everywhere, and being that I'm pretty thin, it felt as if he was scraping against my bone, because I felt like he was hitting my bone. And I was like, oh, this hurts. And so he stopped, and he said the needle was stuck. He's like, oh, I can't get the needle out. And the needle was just like poking out, stuck there. And I was like, oh, that's great. If this was a movie, I mean, me as a patient, I would have fainted. But unfortunately, I was still wide awake, feeling all this pain as he's like trying to yank it out and move it around in circles. I'm like, please don't, this really hurts. And so you can kind of see it. The bruise was a lot worse yesterday, but it's all bruised along here. Basically, my whole hand hurts feeling, touching it, and my hand still kind of hurts with movements, particularly on this side. And so, whew, that was pretty painful. And after a minute or two, he finally got the needle unstuck. He started panicking because he's like, I can't get this out. And he tried many different ways, and then the other nurse came on and tried to help and yank around. I'm like, this is my fault or not this is my fault, but I'm like, I should have said something sooner, that this was hurting from the very beginning, that I have not enough veins for you to be poking around in. Oh. But so that's why it's important for you guys to speak up, so that you don't end up with a needle stuck in you and having to endure all that pain longer and longer, and then eventually faint until it gets worse, which I still didn't faint, so I felt all that pain. Boo. All right, and then the next thing was that he had then found the, afterwards, he put the thing back on, the thing that kind of restricts the blood flow, right, or whatever it is. And then so I was like, oh, you know, usually they use my arm, because he was going to try for my hand again. He's like, I got to find another one. I'm like, oh, please don't. So I suggested, oh, how about my arm? Usually they use my arm because, I mean, that's the best spot for them. And he's like, well, I would, but then, and so when he checked the vein here, it was like popping out, telling him, hey, use me. So he's like, oh, that is a good vein. Oh, okay, I'll use it. I'm like, thank goodness. And so he used that, but then another thing where typically someone might faint if they're scared of blood. Fortunately, I was fine, but, or I guess unfortunately, because I still felt more pain. And then so he poked into here and wiggled, and blood started gushing out. Oh my gosh. So the blood started rushing out, and there was like blood flowing down my arm. I'm like, And so he's like, oh, and he was trying to pretend all calm, right? And so he took his time getting the stuff and blotting the blood, and I was like, you probably want to put the tube on first, because it kept just dripping out. And given I'm small, I don't have that much blood for you to just like mess with. So he put the cap on, the blood stuff, the IV stuff on. So I mean, I know these things happen, and sometimes maybe it's inevitable sometimes, and granted, I'm not one who does like the needles and all of that, so but I do think that if the patient is expressing something to you, such as, even if it's like, oh, I'm feeling some pain, unfortunately many times patients aren't as vocal about it, so you have to kind of see that, oh, they're making faces, that they're in a pain, so maybe we should do something about this. Maybe that's not the right method of just jumping around. So it's always important. Also, typically I imagine you wouldn't want your patient to see that the blood is flowing down their arm, because in his case I've seen it done many times, and usually they'll put the stuff in and then they'll immediately put the IV part in, or the other part, and that's what he did here, but I guess he was just like, I'm not really sure. So the next thing was that they took me into the room, and I had a nurse anesthetician, I don't know what you call them, but the nurse who did my anesthesia, and so I've never had a nurse do it, and granted, this is nothing at all against nurses doing the anesthesia, and so, but the thing is that if you see that the patient is much lower weight than the typical patient that you've worked with, you might need to adjust the level of dosing that you give them, and be careful not. So I'm right now speaking from my husband's perspective, and he is a physician. When he came to pick me up, oh, he was furious. he was furious that the sight of me was completely like, I was not there. I mean, I remember everything, surprisingly, but I was not there. I was flopping around everywhere in the wheelchair, and the guy's like, the guy who was there with me in the wheelchair, he's like, you're gonna have to bring the car around. And I was like, I'm not giving you my key. Yes, I was pretty loopy, guys. I was telling my husband, oh, you sexy beast, I'm not giving you the keys. No, 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 no. None of us have ever seen me drunk, but apparently that's what I would look like if I was drunk. So I was like, no, you're not taking my key. And so he's like, okay, fine, I have to take you with me. I'm like, yay! So we went. I was saying hi to everyone that we passed by. I was like waving at them, saying, looking good. Oh my goodness. And so, poor thing, embarrassed, and me, I was just having fun still. And so when he got me out of the wheelchair, I almost fell over. I was like, wait! He's like, what is going on? She's gone through these procedures before, and it's never been, because they do this monitoring thing, it's never been this bad. What's going on? And then so he investigated, he checked, calculated the dosing, and the dosing was much, we shouldn't say uncalled for, but the dosing, in a sense, kind of was. Because it was way over the amount that I was supposed to be given, and they had given a drug that he mentioned seems almost uncalled for. And they had given that along with something else, and the moment that I smelled the drug when I was in the operation room, I passed out. The moment that it hit me, that I sniffed it, I was like, oh, and I passed out completely. And I've never had that before. I've had this procedure done several times, unfortunately, but had to have it done several times, and I've never had that before at all. So it was quite surprising. And so that's why it's very, very important that you make sure you adjust the dosing as appropriate for the patient, and that you are paying attention to the patient's needs. Even if they can't verbalize or don't verbalize, maybe it's a cultural thing that they don't speak about how much pain they're going through or what have you. Watch their expressions, pay attention to the nonverbal, ask them, because if you ask them, maybe they'll tell you. If they asked me, I probably would have been like, yes, this hurts a lot, please stop. So always be cognizant of who you're working with, because that's super, super important. And honestly, the patient experience, even if all of this had happened, even with all of this happening, if there had been some reassurance and some, how would I say it? Some reassurance and just kind, open-hearted genuineness, I would have felt much more comforted. And so that's why it is super important to have that therapeutic use of self, which in occupational therapy for us is something we're taught all the time, and I'm very sure all of the professions are taught this. So for nurses, for doctors, for occupational therapists, physical therapists, other therapists, all the people, speech therapists, everyone working with patients, please make sure you pay attention to the patient's needs, verbal, nonverbal, ask questions, check in with them, monitor how they're doing, and always make sure you're adjusting to that patient's specific needs, including with dosing, including with how they express themselves, how they communicate to you. There's a lot of things that we can do on our end that are simple gestures and simple things that can make a world of a difference for the patient experience. Alright, so thank you guys for watching, and again, you can find me on Instagram, @OT_lifehacker, and also here where you found me, OT Life Hacker YouTube. So please do like and subscribe. Oh, that's like a boo. No, not boo. Like and subscribe to my channel and comment below on your experiences with all of this, and also just in general comments you have. Please do share with our community, our growing community, which is so awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. I love you guys. Bye bye.